So having dynamic components is good and right. The thing is you have to use them in a specific way. And for that, I have prepared a small example. And this is actually just a drop-down. So I have this page here, the dynamic example drop-down test. And this only contains a drop-down, an example drop-down. And the example drop-down receives two dynamic components. And they're actually just displaying text. So one is entry 1 and the other one is entry 2. The drop-down itself has an, I can remove this for a second. The drop-down itself has an open and close button, and when you toggle it, it displays this div below. There is a main class and there is a drop-down class. The main class has a position relative and the drop-down class has a position absolute. So this section here is actually flowing over, well, at least the HTML that's supposed to be in the back. And we can see that here. The main has a position relative. The drop-down is position absolute. It's offset 20 pixels on the top. That's just to avoid the text in the background, so you can still click it. And then in the move that as well. In the drop down, there's just an ng4. So we're moving over all components that have been handed over as an array into the component. It's not much more we have to do. So wait a minute, you're just going to put in some stuff here. I removed one thing too many, I think. Yeah, here we go. So this is correct. So if we take a look at the component itself, it has this open close button, and every time I click it, it toggles between open and closed. And the entry 1 and entry 2 are the dynamic components I've just handed it over. And this is actually quite a good solution to just create an easy drop-down that you can style in your own demands. Now, the code that I had in before, if we would not do this with the dynamic components, this is the use of the dynamic components, we can also take those two inserted examples and just give it an entry 1-2 and an entry 2-2. And if I compile this and I go to the output, then I see that it's actually just the same thing. The inserted example has a text attribute, and the text attribute, that's the same that we use when we're initializing the drop-down from the outside. So what's the advantage of using dynamic components? I've already hinted this inside the HTML. With the dynamic components, this is made for general use. And if I just insert the two components via template language, this is sort of fixed. This is only one way we can use that. And every time you need something new, you would have to actually rewrite the entire component over here for every specific use. And we want to avoid that. And so we hand the components in dynamically, and this allows us to just put in whatever we want whenever we need it. So the final result of this component would be something like this. This is just sort of the easiest version for it. You could theoretically also replace this with an ng template, so you don't have the diffs inside. You just have to be aware that those might be display inline or display inline block, and then they would not be underneath each other but next to each other. Yeah, and that's an easy way to use the dynamic components, and it has a lot of power in it, because in here I can actually replace this with absolutely anything I want. As an example, I could theoretically put in, I can take this class here, I can go back and replace this, and then this gets dynamic components as an input again, and I would then just, wait a minute, copy this one, and in the inputs replace this with these drop-down components. And what I have created now is actually a recursive version of it that actually, yeah, I suppose it's failing because it's not initialized at the moment. So the content of it is, for whatever reason, is empty at the moment. But I can easily replace this with everything I want. I can also do that at runtime. You might have to redraw the component to make it working, but in general, it works really well.